Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. Ukraine's anti-corruption watchdogs just dodged a political bullet thanks to massive protests and a swift presidential U-turn. Now, if you're President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, your life is essentially one long crisis management seminar between dealing with an invading Russian army, a struggling economy, and a delicate walk towards EU integration. Your room for error is roughly zero. Kyiv reversed a controversial move to weaken anti-corruption agencies, stating loud and clear that Ukraine can't afford mistakes that might push Europe away. On this episode, we'll unpack how citizen outrage made Ukraine's politicians hit Ctrl-Z on a major blunder. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
In the wake of the Ukrainian government's crackdown on anti-corruption agencies, thousands of Ukrainians took to the streets to protest the decision. The protests began after the Ukrainian parliament voted to give the prosecutor general new powers over Ukraine's leading anti-corruption agencies. The decision sparked the country's biggest political crisis since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The new law was defended as supposedly being necessary to remove Russian influence, but no such provisions were included in the document. International agencies and organizations have also been critical of the new legislation. The Ukrainian president has announced that a new bill has been submitted to parliament. This one is meant to restore the agency's independence.
Full guarantees of independence for anti-corruption agencies, real opportunities to check that there is no Russian interference.
Although the protesters have welcomed the decision, many of them remain cautious. After all, nothing has yet been set in stone.
We have heard that the president has submitted the bill, but submitting a bill is not the same as getting the adopted law. So now, we will be very vigilant.
Ukraine has grappled with corruption for many years. Agencies such as the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, or NABU, are meant to help resolve this issue. Overcoming these challenges presented by corruption is also one of the key points that Ukraine needs to address before it can join the European Union. The eyes of more than just Ukrainians are set on what the country's parliament's next move will be.
And now, let's zone in on the East-plaining portion of our show. The matter of Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies have been a major topic in the country's political discourse. The efficiency of these agencies have been both praised and put into question. Let's see how they have actually fared in the fight against corruption.
Critics of Volodymyr Zelenskyy and his government say that the reason behind passing the recent controversial law was because of corruption cases against his associates, such as former Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Chernyshev. A particular case that came to light was when the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine charged Zelenskyy's former Deputy Chief of Staff, Andriy Smirnov, with illicit enrichment in 2024 and money laundering and receiving a bribe in April 2025. There are several more such cases, which shows that NABU has at the very least not been passive and does have some degree of independence from the government. But its work doesn't stop there. In 2023, the agency went after high-profile figures, including oligarchs, who are not aligned with the government in cases that concern millions of dollars. Yet although NABU has seemingly been hard at work, its critics point out that not many of these high-profile cases have ended in convictions. Such convictions aren't truly expected, however, until Ukraine's heavily criticized judicial system has been reformed.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Imagine the public reaction when Ukrainian lawmakers recently passed a bill effectively neutering Ukraine's anti-corruption institutions. Yeah, the backlash was swift, loud, and for Zelenskyy, potentially catastrophic. Thankfully, common sense, or rather street protests and international pressure, prevailed. The story popped up last week when Ukraine's parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, inexplicably voted to gut the independence of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. Now, these agencies are vital. They hunt down corrupt officials, politicians, and oligarchs. Stripping their autonomy, it was like putting the fox in charge of the chicken coop, or in Ukraine's case, the oligarch in charge of state finances. This bill was controversial, baffling, and for many, a shocking move backward. Protests erupted almost instantly, filling streets across Ukraine. Citizens were outraged, fearing corruption would thrive again, just as Ukraine desperately tries to convince the European Union that it's a reliable, reform-minded partner deserving full membership. Zelenskyy, sensing the political and strategic disaster looming, quickly jumped in front of the problem, proving once again he's rather adept at reversing political car crashes at the last second. At a press conference in Kyiv, Zelenskyy was refreshingly blunt. He stated unequivocally, quote, it's very important that society speaks. This may sound like a political PR 101, but given Ukraine's fragile democracy under wartime stress, the statement carried real weight. Zelenskyy understood the optics. Undermining corruption watchdogs isn't just bad governance, it jeopardizes critical EU integration talks and risks alienating vital international support during wartime. The Ukrainian president swiftly drafted and submitted a new bill, not just reversing the damage, but reinforcing the independence of NABU and SAP. The new proposal not only restores autonomy, but strengthens defenses against foreign interference, particularly Russian infiltration, a threat Zelenskyy has repeatedly emphasized. Interestingly, the bill introduces mandatory polygraph tests for anti-corruption and law enforcement officers with Russian relatives. While NABU says polygraphs aren't new, extending them explicitly across all law enforcement sends a powerful signal. Ukraine is committed to transparency and security. Still, it's hard not to wonder if lie detectors might be better employed for the lawmakers who initially thought crippling anti-corruption watchdog was a good idea. But quickly reversing the disastrous bill, Zelenskyy managed to avoid a major diplomatic setback. But this incident served as a stark reminder. Ukraine's journey to Europe is paved with vigilance and citizen engagement. Any attempt to weaken anti-corruption measures will inevitably trigger fierce backlash from society and international partners alike. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Yevgenia Kravchuk, Ukrainian MP, servant of the People Party. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So we're continuing to explore this topic on the rollback of this crackdown on the anti-corruption NGOs. In the span of just 2 weeks, we've seen it being enshrined into law and then quickly reverted. Can you help us give us a little timeline how the process works and where are we right now?
I will allow myself to correct you. It's not NGOs. It's actually official, agencies
right.
that were created almost 10 years ago. And actually, this convocation and our parliament gave all the needed functions, all the needed independence, all the needed budgets, even increasing the budgets for their functioning each year. Despite the war and despite that, all the money that were earned are given to the army. So basically, personally, myself, my position, I haven't voted for the legislation that passed the parliament in this change and this additional provisions and additional responsibilities of the Secretary General. But I will vote and support the presidential legislation that, on the one hand, returns and reverses all the amendments, but also gives additional possibilities for the SBU, the Secret Service of Ukraine, that is responsible for catching all the Russian agents in any of the, agency. It doesn't matter, it's anti-corruption, but also, in national police or other bodies, state bodies. So basically, these are the new provisions that were not in the legislation before, and it was introduced by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Basically, the new legislation was approved by these anti-corruption bodies and supported by the G7 and supported by different political leaders that had conversations with President Zelenskyy in the recent days.
Right. First of all, thank you so much for the correction. And also, I'm curious about the change in stance that a lot of people are seeing right now. Like you mentioned, originally it's voted past to limit the power of these anti-corruption bodies. But of course, people have now since kind of reverted. Do you think it has more to do with be it domestic pressure, be it international pressure, or is it just the fact that the wording and the content of the bill, the law has changed?
Well, I'll it's difficult to explain if you do not know very in details how it's all organized, because actually the Ukrainian anti-corruption system is probably the biggest in any of the even the candidate countries to EU, but any of the EU countries. Basically, the Prosecutor General would have the same responsibilities and rights as it was voted by this new legislation that although resulted in the public unrest, but also the reaction of international from our partners in the West. So yes, it's more than just the juridical, the details, how they're being, how the whole anti-corruption system is being organized, because now we are in the broader political context, and obviously the legislators should have been, thinking about this broader political context. It's these people that were on the streets. It's part of actually Ukrainian political culture. We're a country of two Maidans, right? So if people see something that they think will, result in not going to EU or, will not help fighting corruption, people will not be silent. And I think it's a good sign that Ukraine is a democratic state despite the martial law. And actually, I'm thankful for President Zelenskyy for his reaction, for his fast reaction. I'm sure, I hope that we will have enough votes on Thursday, because the sitting of the parliament will be on the 31st of July, on Thursday, and we will need at least 226 votes to reverse back the legislation.
All right, like I mentioned, we saw Ukrainians protesting on the street, and even though this is part of the political culture in the country, we've also seen one of the largest protests ever since the beginning of the war. But I think there's also a very good point to be made that, like you mentioned as well, it's under martial law, Ukraine's in a war, and it's a very hard balance to walk between kind of guarantee security, stability, and also kind of holding up democratic norms. How is Zelenskyy juggling with these two very hard topics at the moment?
You saw President Zelensky's reaction, and this is the reaction of a European leader that can rethink his own decisions. And, obviously, President Zelenskyy is concentrated on the topic of the war. Yeah. So that's what takes, almost all of his time. So basically, he did sign this legislation, but obviously there was, lack of communication from, all of the bodies before changing it. What I think is that we all have to be wise politically, not to give any chances to Putin and to Kremlin to use this as something, on the one hand, to show that these protests are, basically against the Ukrainian authorities. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was against some decisions, but not saying that, it's against authorities as a whole. That's first. And of course, we do not want to give any cards to our I would not say, enemies, so they're not enemies, but critics inside of some EU countries that would, sort of use this saying, oh, we should not help Ukraine. So I think we need to stabilize the situation as soon as possible and continue to concentrate on the only enemy we have, and that's the enemy is the Kremlin and the invasion of Russian Federation.
All right, so you mentioned the public outcry as well as the kind of foreign reaction. To what extent do you think that these protests have affected the decision to roll back some of these changes?
Well, I think it was a genuine reaction from the president to say that I hear people. And of course, there are some reasons behind of the legislation that was passed on Tuesday. As I mentioned, this structure, when the Prosecutor General has some rights, in the whole system of different law and order agencies. But obviously it was not communicated correctly. And obviously, the topic of fighting corruption was 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, during the Revolution of the Dignity. And obviously, people do not see yet the 100% results of all of these, bodies that fight corruption. And the president of Ukraine, of course, wants to see the results as well. So again, as I mentioned, it was a reaction of a normal European leader that hears the people, especially the young people who want to live in this country and see the future in this country. So I do wait for the sitting of the parliament. I'm in Kiev, and my colleagues are as well, to reverse it and to make sure that all of the system that fights corruption does show results.
All right, now one of the topics that was brought up also is a lot of international leaders have been saying this might hinder Ukraine's chances or kind of push back the timeline of Ukraine joining the EU. Of course, this is announced before this rollback is being discussed. Do you think that now this is going to be reverted? We might see Ukraine's chances of joining into the EU still impacted? Or, like I mentioned, perhaps this is actually a very good showcase of Zelenskyy being like a servant of the people and Ukraine still being very democratic when it comes to listening to people's voices?
I will not repeat what I said. It's important in any of the European countries to listen to the people. But at the same time, the EU integration of Ukraine is still blocked by Hungary. Hopefully, after the reversing this legislation, we will multiply the voices of other countries in EU saying that, look, Ukraine does deserve to open the cluster, the first cluster, and then to open and close other clusters. But so far, we cannot move. Even if Ukraine did all of the homework, and we did, and European Commission mentioned that we're ready. All the countries except one are ready to open the clusters.
All right, thank you so much for your input and insight and helping unpack all of this. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you.
Cheers. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the others from the East that you don't want to miss. The United States has approved a new deal that will send thousands of Cold War-era missiles to help Ukraine. The aim is to bolster Kyiv's air defense systems amid heightened Russian airstrikes.
According to the new agreement, the Ukrainian government will spend over $170 million on vehicles, equipment, training and maintenance for the Ukrainian Air Force's Hawk air defense batteries. The Hawk, full name Homing All the Way Killer Missile, is slowly becoming a crucial element of Ukraine's air defense. It isn't new tech since it first came out in the 1950s, making it far older than the state-of-the-art US-made Patriots. What the Hawk is, however, is reliable and simple to use. There's an abundance of the missiles, which means that supply can last for a very long time. What's more, the Hawk may also be compatible with other, more modern systems that Ukraine already uses, such as the NASAMS developed by the US and Norway.
Alexander Lukashenko is reportedly resuming his scheme to use migrants to exert pressure on Europe. Ukrainian foreign intelligence says that he is using Belarusian territory once more to funnel illegal migrants further west.
According to Ukrainian intelligence, Lukashenko is primarily facilitating transit to Poland. Some migrants are reportedly arriving from Libya directly, or being sent through Moscow, which suggests a coordinated effort between Belarus and Russia. This is in line with the strategy that Minsk employed in 2021, when it orchestrated a migration crisis against states on the EU's eastern border. The effort from a few years ago is widely seen as an attempt by Lukashenko to blackmail the bloc into easing the sanctions imposed on his regime. Although the Belarusian dictator reportedly profits from this flow of illegal migrants, he has been very careful to avoid a full-scale escalation of Europe. Various reports suggest that this is because he prefers to preserve what few political ties he has remaining with European states.
Russia and North Korea are continuing to boost their political friendship. Russia has announced that it has launched the first passenger flights from Moscow to Pyongyang in decades.
The flight connection between the two capitals is a clear sign that once more North Korea and Russia are tightening political and social ties. This decision also comes on the heels of another transportation breakthrough between them, when in June the two countries resumed the Moscow-Pyongyang rail service. Flights between the capitals are eventually meant to be operated twice a week, but for now the service will be available only once a month. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the former's political isolation by the West, Moscow has been seeking new allies. North Korea is one such country. Although the two had close relations before 2022, a breakthrough didn't occur until 2024 when North Korea and Russia signed a strategic partnership agreement.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. For more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.